My name is Dolores R. Carter, and I'm 31. My boyfriend, Jason Hale, is 28. We had been together a little over 4 years, living together for the last 2. From the outside, we looked solid in that boring, adult way people admire without thinking too hard about it. Shared apartment, shared friends, joint Costco runs, matching coffee mugs we didn't remember buying. We had the kind of life that photographs well and lies even better. The problem, according to Jason, was me. More specifically, my work. I own a small logistics software company. Nothing flashy. Nothing people brag about at parties unless they want the room to clear. It meant long hours, constant pressure, and the kind of mental exhaustion that followed me into dinner, into the shower, into bed. I had been trying to get it off the ground for years, and for most of that time, Jason told everyone he supported me. In public, he was patient, proud even. He knew how to sound like the understanding boyfriend of an ambitious woman. At home, it was different. You're always working. You're never really here. I feel like I'm competing with your laptop, Dolores. Those were his favorite lines. He delivered them with this bruised, exhausted tone that made me feel like I had somehow become a burden he had nobly agreed to carry. If I stayed late at the office, he sighed like I had personally betrayed him. If I answered a call during dinner, he leaned back in his chair and pushed his plate away. If something finally went right for me, if I landed a client or got positive news after weeks of stress, he never said congratulations. He'd just smile thinly and say, "Must be nice." I tried to adjust. God, I tried. I started blocking off evenings. I stopped checking emails in bed. I told myself that compromise was what healthy couples did, that maybe he was right. Maybe I had become too consumed by the version of my life I was trying to build. But the complaints never stopped. They just changed shape. You're here, but you're not really here. You don't know how lonely it is waiting for someone who's technically in the same room. I shouldn't have to beg my girlfriend for attention. That last one stayed with me because he said it so softly, so wounded, like he was the abandoned one. Like none of the rent, the trips, the dinners out, the tiny comforts he loved posting online came from the same thing he resented: my work. He never acknowledged that part. He only acknowledged how my ambition made him feel when it wasn't centered on him. About 3 months before everything collapsed, he started staying out later. First, it was harmless. Drinks with coworkers. Girls' night that somehow ran long enough to blur into morning. Office happy hours that turned into after parties I was apparently too busy to understand. Every time I asked a simple question, his answer came back with teeth. "You're being controlling. You don't trust me. Your insecurity is exhausting." And because I was already living inside the version of the relationship where everything was somehow my fault, I believed him. Or maybe believing him was easier than admitting what my instincts were trying to drag into the light. Looking back, that's the part that still chills me. Not that he changed, not even that he cheated. It's how easily I accepted the possibility that his betrayal would still somehow be my responsibility. The first crack had a name, Vanessa. He mentioned her casually one night, while scrolling through his phone on the couch. "Vanessa from work is ridiculous," he said, laughing to himself. I barely looked up. There was always someone from work who was ridiculous or dramatic or impossible, yet somehow constantly texting him. I didn't think much of it, but after that, her name kept surfacing in little ways that felt accidental until they didn't. Vanessa said this. Vanessa thinks that. Vanessa actually gets it. Gets what? I almost asked once, but I already knew the answer would be some version of nothing, delivered fast enough to make me question whether I had imagined the whole thing. Then I started noticing the physical details. When I walked into a room, he tilted his phone away without realizing he was doing it. If I asked who he was talking to, he answered too quickly. Just work stuff. One night, I stayed up later than usual finishing a proposal, and he thought I had already gone to bed. I heard him, in the kitchen, pacing in the dark, speaking into his phone in a low voice, not overtly flirtatious, somehow worse than that. It was intimate in a way that didn't need laughter or raised voices. Soft, familiar, the kind of softness people protect when they know it doesn't belong to them. When he came back into the bedroom and saw me awake, his whole face changed. "Why are you still working?" he snapped. That was his instinct, not guilt, not surprise, anger. A few days later, he picked a fight over nothing. I forgot to take the trash out before leaving for a meeting, and he exploded with a force that had clearly been waiting for a target. He called me selfish, said he felt invisible, said any man in his position would have left by now. Then he said the sentence that split everything open. "I wouldn't have needed attention from someone else if you were actually around. I remember staring at him, my brain lagging behind the words, because some part of me did not want to catch them. "Someone else?" I asked. He crossed his arms immediately, already irritated, already certain of his moral footing. "Oh my God, don't make this dramatic." "It wasn't like that," he said, "at first." That was how he explained it. They had just talked. She listened. She made him feel seen. She understood how lonely he had been. And then, one night after one of my late work nights, it crossed a line. He said it like a sad inevitability, like weather damage, like something that had simply happened to him. Then came the line I still hear in the quiet. "You drove me to it. You were always working." He said it calmly, almost tenderly, like a diagnosis he regretted having to deliver, as if any reasonable person standing in his place would have reached the same conclusion. I thought I would cry, or shout, or beg for a version of him that had never really existed. Instead, something inside me went completely silent. I nodded once. "You're right," I said. The relief on his face was immediate, confused at first, then softer, almost smug. He really thought I had accepted the story. He thought I had stepped into the role he had written for me, the neglectful girlfriend, the emotionally absent woman too consumed by ambition to notice the man quietly slipping away beside her. He started talking more after that, filling the room with explanations I barely heard. "I didn't want it to happen. You know how lonely I've been. I knew you'd understand once you stopped being defensive." I just sat there listening to the sound of the relationship ending. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, cleanly, like a thread finally snapping after being worn thin for too long. That night I slept on the couch. He didn't protest. In the morning, he acted almost normal. Too normal. He made coffee. Asked if I wanted eggs. Complained about traffic outside like he hadn't detonated our life the night before. At one point he smiled and said, "I'm glad we talked. I feel lighter." I looked at him over my coffee and realized something cold and useful. He really believed confession had reset the room. He thought honesty, even late and contaminated, had earned him relief. He thought my silence meant forgiveness. I didn't correct him. Over the next few days, I did exactly what I said I would. I worked longer hours, sharper hours, cleaner hours. I stopped trying to fix us and poured everything into the business. Strangely, it felt easier than it had in months, as if removing the constant background noise of his disappointment had given me back some oxygen I didn't know I was missing. He noticed, of course. "Wow," he said one evening, leaning against the kitchen counter, with that little half-laugh he used when he wanted to provoke me without looking cruel. "You're really leaning into work now." I looked up from my laptop. "I told you," I said. "You were right." He didn't like that answer nearly as much the second time. What he didn't know was that things were finally moving. Quietly. The deal I had been chasing for almost 2 years was nearing the finish line. Lawyers were involved. Numbers were being whispered in calls that ended with my hands shaking. Life-changing money was close enough to feel real and fragile at the same time. I hadn't told him. Not because I was plotting revenge, at least not then. It was more instinct than strategy. Some deep, exhausted part of me already understood that whatever came next belonged nowhere near him. And at the same time, pieces were still clicking into place about Vanessa. The late-night calls, the defensive tone, the tiny slips in his stories that stacked up into something impossible to misread. I stopped asking questions and started listening. That was when the truth got louder. And the louder it got, the quieter I became. Once I stopped arguing, Jason became harder to read and easier to understand. There was no immediate collapse, no screaming match, no dramatic door slam. That would have required him to admit something real had broken. Instead, he moved through the apartment with this strange, relieved confidence, like my silence had restored order. Like he had finally gotten what he wanted from me. Not love, not honesty, but agreement. He wanted me to carry his guilt so he wouldn't have to. And for a few days, I let him believe I would. He started explaining himself in these little careful fragments, as if we were now in some mature post-confession phase of the relationship. He would say things like, "I never meant for any of this to happen," while scrolling through his phone, or, "You know, I've just been really lost lately," in the same tone people use to explain missing a dentist appointment. He wanted sympathy without consequence. He wanted the emotional credit for honesty without paying the actual price of betrayal. I nodded when necessary. I answered when required. But something fundamental had already shifted in me. I wasn't trying to save us anymore. I wasn't even trying to understand him. I was watching. That week, I threw myself into work with a level of focus I had not felt in months. It wasn't frantic, it wasn't avoidance, it was clarity. For so long, every decision in my day had been filtered through whether it would trigger another complaint from Jason, whether a late meeting would become proof I was cold, whether a win would somehow be translated into a personal failing. Without that constant calculation, my mind felt almost unnervingly clean. The deal was moving faster now. After nearly 2 years of chasing it, surviving delays, legal revisions, and the kind of false optimism that drains you by degrees, the acquisition was finally nearing the point where people stopped saying if and started saying when. My lawyer's tone changed. Investors became easier to reach. Numbers started appearing in emails that made me reread them twice. I still didn't tell Jason. He noticed the change in me, of course. One evening, he watched me answering messages at the counter and said, "You've been weirdly calm lately." I looked at him. Have I? He shrugged, but I could see the question under it. Calm wasn't what he wanted from me. Calm meant I wasn't chasing him, wasn't demanding reassurance, wasn't feeding the version of himself that wanted to feel desired and pursued. My lack of panic unsettled him more than my anger ever would have. At the same time, the details about Vanessa kept slipping through the cracks. Once, he casually said he had been near her apartment after work, then corrected himself so fast he nearly bit the sentence in half. Another time, he mentioned something she had told him in confidence and then laughed too loudly, like volume could disguise intimacy. One Friday night, he told me he was out with coworkers and texted at 2:07 in the morning to say he had crashed at a friend's place because he was too tired to come home. No apology, no explanation, just an expectation that I would absorb it. That was the night I started packing. Not furniture, not anything obvious. Just the things people take first when they already know they are leaving. Documents, backups, hard drives, a watch my father gave me, the small box of paperwork tied to the business. I moved them in pieces, quietly, methodically, each trip to my car feeling less like heartbreak and more like a decision settling into bone. A few days later, I confirmed who Vanessa was in the most boring way possible. I was reviewing old business emails when I found a forwarded office invitation Jason had sent me weeks earlier, some team happy hour I had ignored at the time. I clicked it out of idle curiosity more than suspicion. And there it was. Vanessa Cole, Product Partnerships. Same company, same floor. I stared at the name longer than I needed to. Not because it surprised me, because it didn't. I did a quick search, LinkedIn, then her company bio. She was a little younger than me, polished smile, the kind of profile built to signal competence and warmth in equal measure. There was nothing dramatic about her face, nothing cinematic, nothing that explained anything. That almost made it worse. Betrayal is so much uglier when it looks ordinary. That night, I didn't confront him. I just asked one question. "So how's Vanessa?" He froze. Only for a second, but it was enough. His eyes flicked up too quickly, then away. "Why?" he asked. "No reason. You mention her a lot." He laughed, but there was no ease in it. "You're imagining things. God, Dolores, you really have been acting intense lately." Intense. That word almost made me smile. It was such a familiar strategy. Make the observation sound unstable so the lie can stay comfortable. 2 days later, my lawyer called. I was in my car when the call came through, parked outside the office because I had been too tired to drive home right away. He got straight to the point. The deal had closed faster than expected. Clean acquisition, clean numbers, life-changing payout. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. Not billionaire money, not fantasy money, just enough to split my life cleanly into before and after. Enough that I gripped the steering wheel and stared through the windshield while traffic kept moving around me like the universe had not just quietly changed shape. I didn't tell Jason. That night, he came home late again. No excuse this time, no performance of trying. He dropped his bag by the door, kicked off his shoes, and stood in the kitchen, looking at me with the expression of someone about to deliver devastating news about himself, in a way he hoped would still make him look brave. "We need to talk," he said. I closed my laptop. He told me he was confused, that he loved me, but wasn't sure he was in love with me anymore, that my ambition had started to feel intimidating, that Vanessa made him feel seen in ways he hadn't felt in a long time. He said it carefully, like he had rehearsed just enough vulnerability to seem sincere. Then he said the thing that sealed the entire ending. "I think we should take a break. I need space to figure out what I want." I looked at him and saw the whole structure at once. He thought this was generous. He thought this was him keeping options open while deciding which version of his life suited him best. He thought I would wait in emotional suspension while he wandered between guilt and appetite. I nodded. That's probably for the best, I said. His face changed immediately. Surprise first, then relief. Then something almost disappointed, because even then, part of him had wanted me to fight for him. You're okay with that? He asked. Yeah, I said. You were right. I've been focusing on the wrong things. He smiled then, small, relieved, careless, like he had won something. The next morning, while he was at work with her, I signed a lease on a new place. Over the weekend, I moved everything that mattered. Quietly, efficiently. I left behind whatever wasn't mine and whatever no longer deserved the energy of claiming. By Sunday night, the apartment looked almost the same, which felt appropriate. From the outside, our life still looked solid too. I left my key on the counter and sent one text. I'm giving you the space you asked for. He didn't respond until the next day. That was also the day he found out the payout was real, and that the break he asked for was permanent. I was already in my new place when my phone started exploding. At first, it was just a few missed calls. Then texts stacked on top of each other so fast the screen barely stopped lighting up. The tone changed in real time. Confusion, urgency, then panic. Is this true? Why didn't you tell me? We need to talk. Call me now. Apparently, news travels fast when money is involved. A mutual friend congratulated me publicly before I even had the chance to decide how private I wanted to keep things. Someone at Jason's office connected the dots. Vanessa found out. Jason found out. And suddenly, the man who needed space had no tolerance for distance. I didn't answer right away. I finished what I was doing. I ate dinner. I took a shower. I let the silence sit where it belonged. By the time I finally responded, I realized something about myself that unsettled me more than anger ever could. I wasn't furious anymore. I was done. When I finally answered his call, I kept my voice flat. Yeah, I said, it's true. There was a pause on the line. Then his tone shifted so quickly it almost sounded rehearsed. Dolores, he said softly, carefully, I had no idea things were that serious for you. I wish you'd shared that with me. I almost laughed. He made it sound like the betrayal here was secrecy, like I had broken trust by not inviting him into a future he had already stepped outside of. You said my work pushed you away, I said. I figured I should keep doing it. He pivoted instantly. That's not what I meant. It always amazes me how fast people reach for nuance when the consequences stop favoring them. He said we had just been going through a rough patch. He said everything between us had gotten messy and emotional and that maybe we both handled it badly. Then he said the thing that told me exactly where Vanessa stood now. Things with her are complicated. Complicated. That single word carried an entire collapse inside it. Whatever fantasy he had built around being understood and wanted had already started to rot under daylight. He asked if we could meet. Said he missed me. Said he had made a mistake. Said maybe we had both let things get too far. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. His tone sharpened. So that's it? You just walk away after everything? Everything. He said it like loyalty had been mutual, like history alone entitled him to continued access, like the affair was just an unfortunate side note in a relationship I was obligated to keep honoring. I didn't walk away, I said. I accepted what you told me. He went quiet for a beat, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. Less wounded now, more calculating. I stood by you when you had nothing, he said, when you were working nonstop and barely making rent, and now that things are finally paying off, you're cutting me out? There it was. Not heartbreak, not regret. Entitlement wrapped in nostalgia. You didn't stand by me, I said. You waited me out. He accused me of being cold, of punishing him, of choosing money over love. I let the words pass through me without resistance because arguing would have implied there was still something to negotiate. There wasn't. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said, and I meant it. He cried after that. Then he got angry, then practical. The shift was almost impressive. Within 2 days, he was texting me about the apartment, the furniture, what was fair, what he was owed. He told me he had spoken to a lawyer friend, said we had basically built a life together, said my success happened during our relationship, which meant he had some kind of emotional stake in it, if not a legal one. He had practiced that language. I could hear it. I responded once. Yeah, there's nothing to figure out. That was when he lost control. He accused me of hiding money, of planning this behind his back, of emotionally abandoning him, the same way he had always claimed I did. He even dragged Vanessa back into it, saying I had pushed him into her arms and was now punishing him for surviving the loneliness I created. I let him talk until the performance wore itself thin. Then I sent one final message. I found out about her the same week you found out about the payout. Silence. Minutes passed. Then, you went through my things? No, I replied. You weren't subtle. That was the moment the panic really hit him. He started asking questions too quickly. Had Vanessa said something? Had someone at work told me? How much did I know? Who had I talked to? I answered none of it. I blocked him. Over the next few days, other people tried for him. Friends, mutuals. 1 or 2 messages so carefully neutral they practically announced they had been drafted on his behalf. He's not doing well. He feels blindsided. He just wants closure. Closure is what people ask for when the door is already shut. The last thing I heard through someone else was that things with Vanessa had not gone the way he expected. Apparently, she wasn't looking for anything serious. Apparently, she liked him better when he belonged to someone else. I didn't feel smug. I felt free, because the truth had become brutally simple. He blamed me for working too much. I agreed. I kept working, and for the first time in years, it was only for me. The quiet after I blocked Jason felt unnatural at first. For 4 years, my life had been built around reacting to him. His moods, his silences, his passive little punishments, the late-night spirals disguised as just wanting to talk. The way every good day somehow had to be balanced against whatever disappointment he had decided to rehearse. When all of that stopped, the absence was almost loud. Then, slowly, it became peace. A week passed, then 2. Work felt different now, not easier exactly, but cleaner. I took meetings without checking my phone between sentences. I made decisions without wondering whether success would later be turned into evidence that I was cold, selfish, absent, too driven, too much. I slept better, ate better. Even my body felt less defended, like I had finally stopped bracing for impact in my own home. One of my friends looked at me over drinks and said, "You seem lighter." I thought about that for a second. I stopped arguing with someone who had already made up his mind, I said. That was the closest thing I had to a summary. I honestly thought that was the end of it. Then he emailed me from an account I didn't recognize. The subject line was just one word: please. The message itself was long. Too long. Apologies stacked on top of apologies, each one reaching for sincerity and landing somewhere closer to self-preservation. He said he had been scared. Said Vanessa was a mistake. Said he didn't recognize himself lately. Said seeing me succeed had forced him to confront things in his own life he didn't like. He wrote that he never meant to hurt me. But the line that stuck with me was buried in the middle, almost casual in its assumption. I just thought we'd work it out, especially now. Now. There it was again, that same quiet entitlement dressed up as hope. He wasn't writing to understand what he had done. He was writing because the future looked different from where he was standing. And suddenly he wanted back into the version of it that had my name on the lease and my signature on the documents. He asked if I would meet him for coffee. Asked whether I would ever be open to rebuilding. Asked if we could at least talk like we used to. I stared at the screen longer than I expected to. Not because I was tempted, because I was disappointed in a way that felt almost embarrassing. After everything, some part of me had still hoped he might eventually understand why it was over. Not the cheating by itself, not even Vanessa. The deeper thing. The years of making my ambition sound like neglect. The years of accepting what I provided, while resenting what it required, the ease with which he turned his choices into my burden. But even now, he was still talking about access, about re-entry, about whether he might still have a route back into my life if he phrased the regret carefully enough. I didn't respond. 2 days later, I heard through a mutual friend that he had moved out of the apartment. He couldn't afford it alone. Vanessa didn't step in, neither did I. Someone asked me if I felt bad. I didn't, because the truth was, I had lost him long before he cheated. I just didn't admit it until he finally handed me a reason I couldn't explain away. A month later, I ran into him by accident. Same grocery store, same aisle, different life. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, just less certain. The edge he used to sharpen into confidence had dulled. When he saw me, his face lit up for half a second before reality caught up to him and reminded him he was no longer entitled to warmth from me. "Hey," he said carefully, "you look good." "Thanks," I said, and I meant it. He told me he had left his job. Said things there had gotten awkward. I didn't ask why. We both knew. He said he was thinking about moving back home for a while, just to reset. Then he asked the question he had clearly been carrying since the moment our eyes met. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Walking away like that?" I looked at him and thought about everything I used to swallow to keep the peace. The way he weaponized loneliness whenever I succeeded. The way he made my drive sound like betrayal, while quietly living off the life that drive was building. The way he said I drove him to it, as if adulthood had happened to him instead of through him. No, I said, not really. His jaw tightened. Must be nice, he said, to just upgrade your life and leave. I almost corrected him. Almost explained that I hadn't upgraded my life. I had simplified it. There's a difference. But I knew better by then. He wasn't looking for truth. He was looking for reassurance. Some version of me that would still soften the consequences for him. I didn't leave, I said calmly. You told me who you were. I believed you. He scoffed. That's not fair. Neither was cheating, I said. Silence stretched between us. Not awkward, not unfinished, just clean. Before he walked away, he said something quietly, almost like he wanted credit for feeling it. You know, I really did love you. I nodded. I know. And that was the truth. He did love me, in the way some people love stability, in the way they love being chosen, being carried, being close to someone whose future feels sturdy enough to lean on. He loved what I provided. He loved what my ambition made possible for him. He just didn't love it enough to protect it when protecting it cost him attention, discipline, or impulse. As he walked away, I felt nothing dramatic. No anger, no revenge, no urge to turn around and make sure the wound had landed deeply enough. Just distance. That was when I knew I was finally done. Because indifference isn't bitterness, it's peace. A few weeks after that, my lawyer finalized the last paperwork from the acquisition. The money landed where it was supposed to land, clean, untangled, mine. I didn't celebrate the way people imagine you should. No giant announcement, no performative luxury post. I ordered takeout, sat on my balcony, and watched the city move below me like it always had, indifferent to my little private ending and my little private beginning. That night, I thought about the woman I had been a year earlier, the woman apologizing for being driven, the woman shrinking her ambition to keep a man comfortable inside a life he had not built. The woman who thought love meant explaining herself over and over until she sounded guilty enough to be believable. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Jason tried one last time after that, not directly. He messaged a friend of mine, then an old mutual, then someone I barely even talked to anymore. Same script, different messengers. He had changed. He understood now. He just wanted a chance to show me he wasn't that person anymore. But growth that only appears after consequences is not always growth. Sometimes it's just negotiation with better lighting. The last update I heard was that Vanessa had started seeing someone else from work. Someone easier, someone newer. Jason apparently took that badly. Said it was unfair. Said he felt used. The irony there was so complete, I didn't even bother touching it. He told me I drove him to cheat because I was always working. He was right about one thing. I was always working towards something. He just wasn't part of where I was going anymore. I'm writing this a few months later because people keep asking me how I feel now. Like there's supposed to be one final emotion waiting at the end of betrayal. Vindication, closure, triumph. Some clean cinematic word that makes the pain worth narrating. It isn't any of those. It's quiet. My days are simple now in a way they never were before. I wake up when I want. I work because I want to, not because I'm trying to outrun someone else's resentment. I don't explain my schedule to anyone. I don't apologize for being driven. I don't downplay my wins to keep the peace. Sometimes I think about that exact moment, the one where he said, "You drove me to it. You were always working." If I had argued, maybe we would have limped on longer. If I had begged, maybe he would have stayed while still keeping one foot somewhere else. If I had promised to change, maybe I would have made it easier for him to forgive himself. But I didn't do any of that. I said, "You're right." And I meant it. Because he was right about one thing. I was always working toward something. Toward a future, toward a life, toward a version of myself that no longer needed to ask permission to take up space. The week he found out about the payout, he expected a conversation, a negotiation, a reassessment of his value now that the numbers had changed. Instead, he got silence. He got nothing. Not because I wanted revenge, because the version of me who would have shared that future with him no longer existed. He helped erase her, slowly, casually, with entitlement disguised as vulnerability and blame disguised as honesty. I didn't win. I just stopped losing. And if there is one thing I learned from all of this, it's painfully simple. When someone blames you for the consequences of their choices, believe them the first time and keep walking.